And
Okay.
now everything is different.
Everything is officially on the CalArts record. All right, y'all. So today we have Katie Young joining us from her office at Emory University. Katie is a bassoonist and composer and sound artist and sound maker who has a really amazing and kind of individually creative career. And I won't say anything more as a way of introduction other than thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you all. Yeah, it's great that Lauren is here, another bassoonist. That is not always, there's almost never another bassoonist in the room. So it's really exciting to chat with you all today. I haven't prepared a whole lot. So if at any point what I'm saying is redundant or to some things you already know or have already talked about, or you'd like to change the course of the conversation, please just jump in and help me out, because I'm here to share whatever I can that would be useful for y'all. But yeah, I guess maybe I'll start with a little bit about my background. Is that probably the right start? Okay. So yeah, it's actually kind of funny because I'm in Atlanta again, and I went to high school outside of Atlanta. And I had a very typical, like, kind of suburban high school experience. I played in marching band, not the bassoon. I played mallet percussion, then bass drum in drumline, which was really fun. And then I like to say that my first improvising experiences were playing the saxophone in marching band my senior year of high school, and I did not learn the music. I kind of coasted on my reputation and sort of was like, the saxophone, it's new. I haven't learned the pieces for the playoffs or whatever, but I would just get out there and do whatever. It was very fun. So, and I played in youth orchestras and wind ensembles and all that stuff. I had a very supportive family of my music. And I actually realized that now, with a little bit of hindsight, that I had exceptional public music education as a middle schooler in high school. And that one upshot of culture in the South is that, at least in the 90s, the high school music band programs were really well supported because of high school football. And so I started bassoon actually in the middle school. I was telling someone about this recently and she was surprised. So I don't know, sorry if this is this is way far back, but that we started in a class, my first year in 7th grade playing the bassoon was, first of all, they gave me an instrument. Secondly, they started with a class for flutes, oboes, and bassoons only in this class. So it was pretty good foundational public school education. So I would like to give a shout out to that. And then somehow I got accepted to a conservatory and went to Oberlin, where I studied bassoon performance and comparative literature. And it took me a little while to find how I wanted to do that double degrees thing there. But eventually the sort of literature critical cultural theory side of comparative literature was flexible enough and sort of aligned with how I could be in the same headspace a little bit as I was thinking about music and contemporary music more and more. And yeah, I think I didn't really have a plan for my life with music when I started college as an undergrad. I was just kind of oh, people I like, who I think are interesting, are applying for music schools. Maybe I should apply for music schools. Oh, I got in. I'll go. What now I'm learning to make, I don't know. I sort of stumbled my way through it, but I love playing the bassoon, and I continue to love playing the bassoon after all this time. So the choice, our pairing has worked out pretty well. But yeah, as an undergrad, I did all the things you do. I practiced my excerpts. I played the bad repertoire written for my instrument. And I also was lucky to be at Oberlin at a time when, I mean, a particularly like flourishing contemporary music cultural moment. We had an awesome contemporary music ensemble, and I was exposed to a lot of contemporary music. I was become friends with a lot of composers and played student pieces and that kind of thing. I commissioned a piece for my senior recital. And I think a big moment of like a aha moment for me, well, there were kind of two. One was the one where I was like at the Aspen Summer Music Festival, and the bassoon instructor said, when I was auditioning for orchestras, I woke up every morning, I pulled up the shade and I said, what a beautiful day. And then I pulled back down the shade and went back to practicing excerpts. And I was like, no way, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I already felt like I wasn't that good at practicing, like, the way you have to practice to learn excerpts and things like that. And also, I'll say I had some physical issues with my hands, like kind of repetitive strain injury kind of thing, which I had never heard of before at that time. And I got weird treatment that in the end wasn't super helpful. So I spent a few years of college really being pretty uncomfortable when practicing. And I think now I know that it's like stress related to like tension through here. And I was kind of getting that medical advice, but not really. I was also doing suddenly so much more time in the computer and all that stuff, and probably not taking very good care of myself. So I think it's common for undergrads to deal with some of this stuff, but that was challenging, right? And so there were those kind of negative moments with my relationship to the bassoon where I was like, it hurts to practice as much as I'm supposed to practice in the way I'm supposed to practice. And also I don't want to only practice excerpts. But then on the other side of things, I was like getting exposed to all this really exciting music. And like when I discovered the music of Sofia Gubaidulina, I was like, oh, maybe I do still want to play the bassoon. And I played quasi Hakatus as an undergrad with two of my very dear friends who I still am close musical soulmates with. And so we learned that trio for viola, bassoon, and piano, which is really an awesome piece. And the viola part is so hard. Amy Simony, who is Amy played that with us. So she's now at, we played that together. She's at UCSD, musicologist now, officially. But yeah, so I was kind of like in this middle ground where I was like, when I graduated, but I was really, I guess I was just like, I'm not giving up. I'm going to finish. I'm not going to quit the bassoon. I don't know. I feel conflicted about it, but I'm not giving up. So I kind of left college with this backlog of creative energy that I didn't compose. Oh, I should say I did take a couple of classes that were sort of for composition students, like Trends in Contemporary Music, which was more of an analysis class that I got exposed me to a lot of 20th century repertoire. And then I took a composer performer workshop where I did do a little bit of writing. And then I also co-wrote a piece with my friend Clara Latham, who now teaches at NYU. And we we're like a G sharp now. I mean, we like wrote every note together. It was very funny. And I don't know how we did it, but we ended up with a piece for bassoon and accordion that it's not like there was an accordion studio. So I don't know who we thought was going to play this. And the accordion part was so hard that we had to split it and make it for two accordions and bassoon, which turned out to be cool because then they were like antiphonal. So I did have a little bit of encouragement from friends and certain faculty. Lewis Nielsen, who is a composition faculty there, was really supportive of me and he coached us in that Goodbye Delina trio and taught the composer performer workshop, and, you know, certainly never made me feel like I couldn't be a composer or write music or whatever. But I really didn't feel comfortable in, I was really like, I'm not creative in that way. Like, I can't be a composer. My dad at one point was like, have you thought about doing composition instead of performance? And I was like, no, you know. So I don't know what that's about. But it took a while. It wasn't I didn't feel comfortable in that role immediately. And somehow I needed to get out of Oberlin before I felt like I could kind of just sort of explore things. You know, I had not a bad relationship with my bassoon teacher, but a complex one. And he didn't necessarily, we didn't really get each other. And I think I needed to have some space. So, anyway, then I moved to Chicago with Amy and a few other friends, Erica Dicker, a violinist. And we just started playing music together. And I really understand it that in the way that, like, Amy and I taught each other how to improvise together. We just decided to start having a duo, and we, you know, did it in our we rehearsed in our apartments. And so initially, improvising was the most immediate way for me to get to creatively express myself, was because I had this relationship with the instrument. And honestly, like, I listened to some recordings, I was like, whoa, I could play the bassoon pretty well then. Yeah, like, I was in really good shape. So yeah, we had a great time, and we were able to find spaces, venues that would present, that we could play shows at. It was an open enough scene that we were able to get some experience early on. And so I started composing and improvising kind of at the same time, right after my undergrad. And I did those two things in tandem, and they were very connected, and they've always been very interconnected for me. Maybe I'll pause and take a breath and see if anybody has any questions at this point, or thoughts or comments. I can keep going, but it's a little bit.
Well, I think I don't know if it's a question or more just an observation, especially with the two people who are here as well, with that urge of, like, wanting to play with your friends and not having music and just to improvise together. Because I know that Lauren and Mason play out together, and there's not a lot of bassoon and tuba repertoire. So I just wanted to, like, kind of highlight that point as just that wonderful advantage of having a close friend that you can learn skills, whatever those skills are, together with musically.
I mean, for me, the friends, the relationships have always been really crucial to my development, my interest in music, frankly. I mean, I love it. I think I also just like the community that it allows me to be a part of. That's a big part of it for me. And even to this day, like, I think I prefer to really know the people I'm working with, as, you know, as friends on some level, and feel like I'm making something with them or for them that is useful and relevant and meaningful to them in that moment. And so, yeah, playing with your friends, it's where it's at. It's, like, definitely the best part of music, and and why we keep doing it, I think. So yeah, I spent a few years in Chicago playing in bands, and playing kind of within the sort of free jazz adjacent experimental improvised music scene there, playing in some pop bands. And I also started amplifying my bassoon around that time. There wasn't an easy or readily available amplification system that I could find and afford for the bassoon in the year 2002 or 2004. And so I struggled, and I had this terrible situation with that fed back chaotically with like actually now I'd probably like it, but it had a lapel mic that I dropped down, like a one from like Office Max or something, that I dropped down the bell, and then like an SM57 up front, and it just, and a little mixer, but it was very finicky. And then one day I like got on Forest Double Read or something, and I like I saw this this mic. And so I got it, and I used the I have a picture.
Little Jake.
I see, this is I'm so dating myself, but it's pre-Little Jake.
Okay.
Wait, do I have share screen privileges?
You do, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, it's disturbing sometimes when you start talking about tech that you've used and realize it's older than the students you're showing it to.
I know, it's ridiculous.
Not older, it's okay.
No, it's cool. Actually, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna get the actual thing. It'll be
Okay.
easier and more interesting. 1 sec.
Sure, yeah. How are the two of you doing?
Hanging in.
Surviving.
Uh,
No,
it
long
says, is everything turned off in the building this week, other than power?
No, all the power's still on. It's just like the hot water and the HVAC.
This one. So it's similar to the Little Jake, I think, but it's it's a mount, a Bocal mounted, probably glorified piezo, but it's the it didn't really come with any specs. It just says telex on it, and which have made me think it was like a telephone. I don't know, but anyway, this microphone really, this set, and like, you know, I got this whole thing for like $200, and with the Bocal, which was a great deal, and I was really excited. And so this really changed my life, because I could, you know, suddenly get a really clean signal from across the whole instrument. But it didn't really sound that nice. It's kind of a nasal tone quality. And so that was my sort of door that opened my gateway drug into pedals and working with electronics. Was that at first I just wanted the bassoon, I just wanted it to sound more like my acoustic sound. And I just wanted to be louder because I was playing at like places where people were chatting, or, you know, espresso machines and bars were happening, or I was playing with drums or whatever. So I just needed to be louder. But so at first I just used an EQ pedal, a volume pedal, and I did get a reverb pedal early on. Those were my first 3 pedals, I think. And so it was pretty simple. I just was trying to make my bassoon louder and sound nice for kind of pop-ish kind of projects. And so, yeah, that was kind of where things were when I left, I think when I left Chicago the first time, after 3 years. And I got accepted to Wesleyan, which is for a master's program there. And that's where I went to study with Anthony Braxton, as well as Alvin Lucier was there. So I just super unfortunate to have gotten to be there at that time with them. And I feel like working with Anthony was huge in that, I mean, among other things, I realized that when I started Wesleyan, I felt like my self-identity was like a bassoonist who wanted to be a composer. But when I left Wesleyan, I felt like a composer who plays bassoon, or that I had a shift, an identity shift that was really significant for me in my confidence and sort of my feeling like where I wanted to put my energies, and, you know, that I felt some legitimacy, as someone who was writing music. And, you know, I had an opportunity to write for a string quartet that they brought in residence. And I, you know, had a master's thesis concert, and I put together a lot of music, including like this Wurlitzer and tuba piece that Maddie's played, was from my master's period at Wesleyan. And then
it's a good piece.
I know it's pretty good. It's stood up since it's stood up. It's probably the oldest one that I still like. And the tuba is so awesome. And I worked with Dan Peck on that, or I wrote
Oh,
it for
nice.
Dan, who I met because he was coming out to Wesleyan to like stalk Anthony, and he just like sit in on the ensemble class. So anyway, yeah, and Dan played that on my recital. Yeah, and then I moved to New York to play in bands with like my other female improvising musician friends that more of them were there. And I've never worked a ton with Mary Halverson, but she was there, and Jessica Pavone, who I have worked with more, was there. Worked with Mary a bit, but just there were more like Chicago when I was there in the early 2000s was pretty male dominated. There was like Nicole Mitchell, Tamika Reed was in and out a bit. And Nicole was, to my mind, like, yeah, she was not my peer, or I was not her peer. She was way above me. And so I didn't have a lot of contact with her. So there just weren't and a vocalist named Carol Giannetti, who's amazing, but there just weren't so many. Whereas I felt like there was a bit more of a crew in New York. And so I wanted to go there. Also, Amy was in New York doing her graduate studies at NYU. So yeah, I lived in New York for a few years, and I got some cool composing opportunities through Issue Project Room and other things. And I played in a pop band, and I got some more pedals during this time. I also formed I like the octave pedal. I acquired the octave pedal at that point, which is, yeah, I like went on some tours in Europe, got to play in different bands. So I was doing a lot of playing then too. And I formed a band. I made a solo album. Somebody asked me to make a solo bassoon album, and I was like, okay. But I didn't have any music yet. So I had to develop that. And that was very stressful and scary, to be honest, but amazing that someone paid for that to happen. So I did that, and then I had this but I was still not comfortable really as a solo performer. So I rearranged a lot of that music for a quartet, and that was how I formed this band Pretty Monsters that I played with for a number of years. It was kind of like I was like doing the New York band leader thing, which is like a very New York thing. I feel like the Katherine Young's Pretty Monsters. It's a very like New York way that people do things, right? I mean, it's cool. Yeah. But it was like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. Okay, so I'll do that. But that was a great experience. I love the people in that band, and we had a really fun time working together. And we made an album too. So, one thing I really learned from Anthony, or, he models, is this idea that you have an idea for some music, and maybe it doesn't always happen in this exact order, but the parts of the puzzle, or the whole pie is like, you write the music, you form the band, you tour the music, you make an album, you release the album, and you need to do all of those things for the piece to be finished, so to speak. It's not this like, oh, I write a piece in finale, and then that's the end. It's this whole process of having the musical ideas, getting them down somehow, finding the people that you want to realize those ideas with, and getting the music out into the world, both through live performances, ideally a couple if it's your band, and then and making an album as part of that. So I really I took that to heart, and really did, try to do that for projects in that period, especially. So yeah, but up until this point, I hadn't really had like an orchestration class, or and I had like a commission for the string ensemble of Brooklyn, I remember. And I wrote this piece, and I was like working a full-time job, playing in bands, like burning the candle at both ends pretty intensely. and I just was really tired a lot of the time. And I wrote this piece, and I just remember being so unhappy with it from just for myself. I just felt like it was really, I didn't like it. It wasn't what I wanted to do. There was a gap between what I wanted the music to be and what I had the skills to get down on paper for an ensemble. And so that was a sort of turning point for me where I was like, I really need to go back to school, and I want to go back and learn some more traditional compositional things, like, and maybe it was partially I needed it for myself to feel confident. Like I sort of felt that imposter syndrome thing of like, never had an orchestration class, like I'm not a real composer. So I applied to grad schools, and I wound up at Northwestern. And that was I think a really good fit for me. When I entered there, Lee Hyla was on faculty, who, if you don't know Lee's music, you should definitely check it out. Really, really interesting and kind of specific. He's got his own thing that he does as a composer. His pieces didn't include improvisation. It was all fully notated, but he had come up through New York and like downtown scene. So he had a real appreciation for and respect for performers, composer performers. Like he wasn't coming from a super academic, extremely classical side of perspective. And so he was very supportive of me and was part of the reason that I went there. Unfortunately, he passed away my second year of grad school, which was very unexpectedly. But it turned out that there were other folks at Northwestern that were also really wonderful to work with. And yeah, Lee's death was a huge loss to us and to, I think a lot of people for sure. But I was able to find support from other faculty at Northwestern afterwards. Hans Tamala in particular has been really great for as a mentor. And yeah, and then being in Chicago was awesome because I was like back where I knew people, new venues. So I had an easy into playing shows still, as well as doing stuff at Northwestern, but I didn't have a really isolated kind of graduate experience. It was really integrated with the music scenes in Chicago. And I was working for Pitchfork Music Festival as a side hustle. So I was, which is run by or at least it is run by Mike Reed, who also runs Constellation, the venue. So I was working with Mike when he opened Constellation. So that was really exciting. So I was, kind of really involved in the music that was happening in Chicago, in the experimental music that, outside of academia. And that was really meaningful for me. And I think it ended up being professionally productive and helpful in some respects. Although I wasn't thinking about it in that way. Yeah. And so then, I don't know, I've kept playing so maybe I'll stop there actually. I can talk more about that's the fairly long story of where I got sort of through school basically, but.
And what's just to wrap up the kind of where you got or from, what's your official title at Emory now?
Assistant professor of music, but I'm in, and we have a Bachelor of Arts program. It's a liberal arts situation. So I officially assistant professor of music, but I'm in the composition area. Yeah. So no, not a bassoon job.
But I think that cool. Thanks. I figured that would be just a good go, where that part took you from a bassoon conservatory degree to a professorial position in composition. We have a lot of students who I'll speak for some of them since they're not here, who are kind of have gone the conservatory route and are trying to sort of figure out the next step. and also have similarly, a lot of them have expressed complicated relationships with undergraduate teachers, and it's a common theme, unfortunately. And also the thing you're talking about in relationship to getting in relation to both of your comp degrees, of kind of that feeling of imposter syndrome, and the way that it's like when you get a degree in something, how you feel. It's almost like you have more permission to do it or something in that relationship, or on that side of things. I was curious also about as you move into this kind of like becoming a composer who plays the bassoon in an external perspective of like, how do you feel like that affects your relationship to like, in the reverse of like, I guess the moving away of the pressure of like an Oberlin degree of you're a bassoonist towards being a person who plays the bassoon as part of their art, and like, does that, as the composition side gets more strengthened, does that lead to a different type of imposter syndrome to deal with?
With the bassoon?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well,
that's something that I feel as well, and I know other students have expressed that.
Yeah. I think that I really distanced myself from the bassoon world like as soon as I was out of undergrad. I probably for the reasons you're saying. Like, I knew I wasn't going to play the bassoon the way that exactly I was taught to play it. And so I was like, well, and I wanted to play the bassoon I just wanted to play a lot of different kinds of music, and I wanted to play the bassoon. So I was like, well, I don't feel like learning another instrument. I just learned this really hard one. So like, I'm going to play the bassoon in this pop band, in this dub band, in this like noise project. And honestly, I didn't encounter bassoonists, so I didn't feel, everyone was just like, what's that? Yeah. And so I kind of just didn't, well, that part of me just was like, I'm not connected to that world anymore. And I think I have come back to it now. It took a long time. Like, I didn't go back to Oberlin. I mean, this is all off, very personal amongst us, but like, I didn't go back to Oberlin for like 10 years because I wasn't ready to go back. And I had a really nice lunch with my teacher. And I will say, I'm listed on his website, which I was like, oh, I don't know. At the bottom, but maybe it's alphabetical. That's fine. But I think there is that thing where who are the favorite students, right? Who are the ones that the teacher's like, you're good. And at least that was my experience. And I was never felt that way as I was, so, but there have been also but I have met a few bassoonists along the way that are really awesome, that don't vibe me, that totally do, that are also doing cool things. And like Sarah Schoenbeck, for example, is amazing, is a wonderful person, is a fabulous bassoonist. And, the first time I played a show with her was probably in like 2008 or 9. And I remember I was really excited. I was like, I haven't heard a bassoon played by someone else in I don't know how long, in 6 years or something. And it was really exciting. And so there have been, it is nice to connect with other bassoonists and to kind of geek out with people. And I'm actually working like this week on a piece with Ben Roydel Ward and Dana Jessen, for a trio that we're co-composing for ourselves. So I'm pretty excited about that. But I think that, yeah, the whole imposter syndrome thing, I mean, it's totally, I don't even know. It's like total, everybody has it, I think, or most people. It's also like really about you feeling, it's not, I think like, at least that's my perspective, that it's not that other people are telling you that you can't do this or you aren't this thing. It's just like, for whatever reason, at least in my experience, I just needed to have enough experiences under my belt to feel like I was confident in myself. So I think some of it just takes time. But I always had whether they maybe weren't bassoonists, but I always had friends that were playing that I played with, and I did feel like confident, for example, as a chamber musician. That's something I think I really did learn and benefit from learning as in conservatory training, was chamber music. Because that's really what you do when you're doing new music, is it's mostly chamber music, and it's a lot of like problem solving with a group of musicians to make something work, and listening while playing, and all of that sort of thing. So I think that the collaborative aspects of chamber music were really formative. And I remember thinking at some point, like, oh, I know how to do this. Like, I know how to rehearse and and play chamber music. That's cool. I didn't realize it was something I was learning, if you know what I mean, until later. And then I really appreciated that part of my schooling. And so I think that, like, also I'll say I don't know, maybe I'm sure I have blind spots, but I feel like there has also been an opening up of at least contemporary classical music in terms of this, of like a real acceptance of the composer performer identity as one that is legitimate and in fact celebrated more a lot right now. And so I feel like I was fortunate to be amidst that kind of change in that field. I don't know if that feels true to your experience or observation, Maddie, but I feel like when I started out, that wasn't an identity that you were a composer or a performer. But I feel like now that's really a legitimate and respected place to make music from. You have a program.
Yeah, I was gonna say at Cal Arts especially, I think it's a skewed view in the sense that we have a program, but it does feel like, especially
when that program began?
I think in the 90s.
Yeah, so
yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that. I know that's one of David's big focuses. The DMA has been about a decade and they opened it up to undergrads, I think 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, so not that long, really. Yeah.
But it feels like it's really changing from the performance side. Like, it was more accepted for, like Stu Dempster to become a composer as a trombonist, but his view as a trombonist was sort of like, oh yeah, well, he's not very good. It feels like the performance side is getting kinder, which is really nice.
Or just more accepting of different approaches, maybe. Yeah,
it seemed like the LA Phil bassoonists were very excited to be on stage with you, which is cool.
They were really excited. They were, I didn't have a lot of time with them, but they tipped me off to a new microphone that I need to look into. Something that goes in the vocal. Do you know about this one, Lauren?
No, in the vocal. Mine screws on like yours.
Yeah, maybe I got it. I'll just need to email this person and ask them what it was, but they were telling me about a new one.
Is it like the kind that John McCowan uses now, where it's like this really thin, long thing that he puts like in, and then it sounds really good.
Yes, that's the one. That's the person who, that uses it, I think. Yeah, so I got to look into that. But they were excited. They were really accepting and welcoming, and so, and Ben Royal Ward is an incredible bassoonist who just got a professorship at University of Illinois. And, you know, he's like the new generation in some ways of instrumental faculty who are also playing experimental music, you know, open to contemporary techniques. And, you know, yeah, he's happy to collaborate. So I think that's a good sign. Yeah. But Dana's, yeah. So anyway, I mean, Dana's awesome too. So that's exciting. Yeah, I think that the other thing that I didn't really talk about, but that is fairly, or I mentioned, but it's fairly technical, is that the situation with like my hand and arm pain really did impact how I started improvising. And I think it really informed the vocabulary that I found on the instrument early on and got excited about. For example, instead of playing a lot of like fast finger work passages, I would gravitated towards more like finding a multiphonic or something, and then like seeing what all I could do with that fingering, like, so minimal fingering changes and a lot of like embouchure, throat, breath stuff, because that was more comfortable than like, and so it was really like in some ways it was, I've found ways to play the bassoon that have been comfortable for me, and using amplification is really helpful, I have to say, because I found I have a lot of sounds I like to use when improvising that are without the reed. And that's, you know, if haven't been practicing a ton, just to be frank, like you can play those sounds and they still sound interesting. And so, I mean, it's practical too, in the sense that like, it's allowed me to maintain a relationship with the instrument without feeling like chained to practicing 2 hours a day, which is not something that I have the time. That's not going to happen right now. I wish I could practice more, and I wish I practiced more regularly, more consistently, but I really practice. I like get in shape for a show. So I'm like, oh, I have a show coming up. I need 1 to 2 weeks to get in shape. And so I feel like my technique has kind of like leveled off and I can maintain it, but I'm not like getting a lot of new technique right now, which is just kind of where I'm at right now. I think I feel like with the bassoon, it's like there's some periods where I'm doing more with it and less, and it kind of ebbs and flows. And I have been pretty active. This year has been a lot of playing, but and it was exciting. I was in probably some of the best shape I've been in for that LA Phil gig. It felt good. It feels good to get in shape. You know, you're like, oh yeah, like, but it's something that I do let it slip. But it's also kind of freeing to not be like, I remember when I was in college, it's like, I would take the bassoon everywhere. It's like you go to the beach with your family for a week and you're like, well, I got to practice. And it's just like, man, it's a drag. So it's nice to have find a balance. And I feel like I've found a balance where I'm aesthetically and artistically doing a lot of what I want to do with the instrument. And works out for like, in terms of the time I can give to it. So.
I think that's a really good point of that, like, acceptance of like, that's where it's at right now because of what I'm doing artistically, and like that's okay.
Yeah. And what's nice, if you're composing the music, is you can write what you can play, and what feels good to you to play. So yeah.
What makes it so nice to practice.
Yeah.
You should still practice. It's still good to practice.
But I think it's a really good point of that, like, sometimes things are going to have an ebb and a flow, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it takes time to be able to have the perspective on those arcs, such that you are not stressed out by them. But at this point, I have like a sense for, okay, as long as I'm practicing regularly a week before the show, I'll be okay. It'll be cool. And like for the LA thing, I was like, I got to practice a little farther. I got to start a few weeks back. This is a bigger deal. But but I guess the other part of that for me is that I know about myself that I need to be playing with other people in order to continue to practice. Like I love playing the bassoon, but I am not going to practice unless I have a reason that involves other people. And so finding like communities where I live to play with is really crucial. And that's something that has been challenging and I'm still working on here in Atlanta is like, who are the people I have found a very accepting group to like to do sort of conducted improvisation with, which is pretty awesome and special. But I don't have like a band here or like somebody who I can really, a person or two that I really can like, that I really play with a lot. So that's still, and I need it to be here local because I need to be able to do it, every week or two, ideally. So, but it doesn't have to be a show. It's, I don't know, it's tricky, right? Like some of that's just like, I need to just hang out with people and play music sometimes. So
That's the tricky part after school is like finding a way to keep those relationships where you're regularly playing with people, even if it's not performing.
yeah, and sometimes it doesn't need to be a performance. Like what you're doing does not need to be heard by anybody else. It's just like for you. And it's important, but yeah, we've talked a lot, but like Lauren, sorry, is it, what's your name?
Mason?
Mason. Okay. Lauren and Mason, do y'all have any questions or things you'd like to discuss?
They can be anything into the weeds too. Like,
Yeah.
I have a general kind of question. You talked about it just a little bit, like when writing for yourself, you can write things that you're comfortable with and good at. Like, how does writing for tuba and Wurlitzer differ from writing for yourself? Or like, do you have different mindsets when you're writing for different groups?
Well,
If you
actually,
them
I
or
never,
not.
sorry, go ahead. What was that?
Oh, like if you're in the group, does it change if you're in the group?
Well, to be honest, writing for myself has been harder in some ways to figure out. Mostly because I like improvising so much that I don't really I'm not good at following my own directions or something, or staying with what I said. I'm always changing it. And it's like kind of crazy making. So I like that writing for people is like, well, I mean, there's something I appreciate about being like, well, I have been told to be the composer, so I will do that. And now I get to make some decisions and I don't change them as much. But I do think that what I try to do as much as possible when writing for someone is figure out what they like playing and write that, like what is it that you enjoy doing on your instrument? It's a simple question, but it's one of my favorite things to ask people early on is like, what are you excited about playing on your instrument right now? Like, is there something that you are excited about that, so it could be a technique or an approach or so I do try to get that information when I'm writing for folks, and let their enthusiasms and sort of proclivities on the instrument guide some early compositional decisions about the vocabulary. So I think in some ways it's similar. I just, for myself, I'm like not going to write certain kinds of things for a bassoon, but it was fun with LA because I was like, oh, I'll give that to them. Like, and I'll like, that's cool. I don't need to play that part. like the really like the enter on a high D. I'll like let them try to deal with that, but I'll come in on a B because that's a little easier. But I guess like I feel a sense like I feel like I have this relationship with the bassoon that is really mine, and it involves the electroacoustic instrument kind of, and it's just it is what it isn't for everyone, and it's not like it's not just like a neutral bassoon. Do you know if you know what I mean? So but I don't know but anybody else who does it quite like that, so it's kind of like just my thing, and I'm like that's okay, either you want it or you don't. So, and a lot of people don't want it. I mean, I don't get asked to be in that many people's bands, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what that's about exactly, but I think people don't really think about it. They're just like, they're not like they're like drums, guitar, bass. They don't like think, oh, bassoon, obviously.
Unfortunately, bands need more bassoon.
Definitely.
Do you have any questions you want to bring in, Lauren? To put you directly on the spot.
Yeah, I was thinking about this thing. You got so many. I was trying to find just sort of one. Maybe how did the LA thing come about? The LA Philharmonic concert, and like how did you sort of work on that piece, devise it? And there wasn't much rehearsal time, so how did that all go?
Yeah, well, that piece is a bit of a weird one because, I mean, it was, they commissioned me. I'm not sure why or how they decided to ask me to do it, but I got the email, and it was actually John Adams's suggestion that I write for me as an improviser with the ensemble. And this was back in 2017, actually. And I was supposed to have, I wrote a version of the piece that was going to be premiered in March of 2018. But I flew out there and I got the worst flu of my life. I was like so feverish that I was like hallucinating. It was crazy in the hotel room. So the piece didn't happen. And then the pandemic happened, and then many years passed before it could be rescheduled. And to their credit, they did reschedule it. And when I came back to the piece, like over the summer, to prepare for the show this spring, I was like, oh, I don't know about this piece. And so I heavily revised it, but I didn't just start over for a number of reasons, some which were pragmatic, some were kind of out of this weird loyalty to it. But so the piece had this sort of like, I understand it as a kind of palimpsest where there are layers from this version of the 2018 version. And then I was like, but actually now I'm interested in this completely other thing. So I'm going to put that in there too. And so it's got the 2023 stuff on top of it. But one of the most significant revisions that I made was to have the ensemble improvise more. And I think like I've been told, people are told all this, you hear all the time, like if you're writing for orchestra, don't have them improvise. They're not comfortable. They're not going to do it. It's going to be like pulling teeth, blah, 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 blah. So at first I didn't do it. The first version was like fully notated for them, with me basically completely unnotated. And this, when I came back to it, I was like, that's really extremely didactic and not super interesting. So I notated some more specific parts for myself, not extensive, but just moments of like coordination with the ensemble. And then I also there's more parameters for the orchestra, it's not an orchestra, but the players to improvise, or at least make decisions about when to play certain materials. And I think that that made the piece a lot stronger from my perspective, just compositionally. I found it more interesting. It was more fun to play. And I think that if we had had a little more rehearsal time, it would have been even better in terms of how they delivered their parts, especially, and how we worked together. I think it did take a little bit of getting used to. But I think people were game and they had a good time. So yeah.
Do you think you'll play it again, or will it be like a?
I don't think they're gonna play it again anytime soon or ever, but I mean, maybe, but I'm not counting on it. But my friend she was like, oh, you should send it to these people and these people. So a couple groups in Berlin, actually, she recommended. So I might do that. Seems can't hurt. But it is pretty idiosyncratic. I mean, it could be arranged for another improviser, so I think, but there is something cool about the 3 bassoons, so maybe it really does need to be a bassoon. I'm not sure how it would work, like for a saxophonist, let's say, or something, as the soloist. I think it could work, maybe.
You don't think it would always have to be you as a soloist? It could be someone else.
I would like that. Yeah. I mean, I think that it would be very different, and that would be cool with me. But I think that somebody would have to be willing to kind of take that on and kind of almost rearrange it a little, not like renotate much, but just their own part. They'd have to kind of take what I have sketched for myself and then be like, how would I do what I would want to do, similar-ish when it needs to be similar, and when would I diverge from that part. I would be totally open to that and excited for it to happen if someone was interested, which is why I called it like for improviser or something, improviser and ensemble or something instead of bassoon. I wanted to have that option. Yeah.
That's cool.
Maybe you'll play it one day.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
That'd be awesome.
I'll send it to you if you want to see.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Finding the accompaniments was the hard part, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a big, weird ensemble too.
But it's not totally crazy. It's not like you need an orchestra.
No.
This is like,
Although I do think I think it would be cool with like a fuller string section. Maybe. But it works. It worked fine without the big string section.
And then you're teaching at Darmstadt this year?
Oh yeah. That's really feels like some kind of coup to me, but is exciting. I think it was a kind of confluence of factors that, but it's cool that they are giving me that chance to run the bassoon studio. I was really clear when I accepted that. I was like, just to be clear, I'm not teaching any repertoire because I don't know any repertoire. So if you want like it to be like, come make music, like so the bassoon studio's goal is really like for people who want to like improvise and like collaborate or co-compose or make their own pieces. And that I hope that there'll be some people who are into it, but I'm not teaching it in a like traditional way, because I wouldn't be the person to do that. Like that's not really what I have to offer, I don't think. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I hope that some folks sign up and can come. I know it's a long way and it's expensive to get over there. So
I saw that there was another course that you were teaching about improvising that was like separate from the bassoon studio thing.
yeah, it's like a short 3-day kind of mini seminar with Yaron. Is that the one you?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't really know. I think it's like Yaron Deutsch is doing the guitar studio and he's bringing in a saxophonist and then me, and like we're going to each give a talk or two. And so I actually thought that would be cool. Hopefully I have not organized things yet, but my thought is that the bassoon studio would participate in that with the guitar studio for a couple days, but that, over the course of the workshop, that, we would find ways for the bassoonists to make their own pieces to play with each other or on their own, or potentially, yeah, with another instrumentalist that they could find.
So that's such it's really awesome that they're hiring you. And it is a really great strength of Drum Start, where they have all those short workshops that you can do. So
Yeah.
many different things over the 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be action packed. And the other thing is that Anthony Braxton will be there. And so as teaching, and I guess I might teach composition some too, I hope. I don't know how that will pan out, but that was what we talked about. But Braxton is there we'll teach some composition, but they're featuring his music. And so I get to play with him in the Thunder Music Ensemble. So that will be very fun. And there's a Braxton conference. So I'm going to be very busy with like the Braxton conference, the bassoon studio, this thing Yaron roped me into. So yeah, it'll be busy, but it'll be fun. And it seems like there's a lot of energy around improvisation and sort of that, aspect of creative music making and like a long overdue recognition of some of like the Black American practitioners of, improvised music that have been sort of kept out of the classical European narrative. So with George Lewis kind of spearheading that, and Tyshawn and Anthony, and I think it's really an exciting year for Darmstadt. I'm looking forward to it.
It's a big change for them.
I know,
Yeah,
it's like
it is.
finally, but better at least now.
Yeah, I think it was in 2018 was the last time I was there, and there's like, I think they only had like one of the or maybe two of the old guard new music groups there. So it seems like that still has been maybe shifting for a few years, and it's finally kind of turned, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think Alvin Singleton was listed as on the composition faculty too, so it's cool. Maybe he was there before, I'm not sure. But yeah, he lives in Atlanta and I've never met him. Although the person who cut my hair most recently says he cuts Alvin Singleton's hair. So I was like, well, obviously I found the right person to cut my hair. Although I don't know what Alvin's hair looks like, but I just thought that was cool.
Actually, the exact same haircut.
Yeah, so no, it's exciting. It's exciting.
And the deadline for that hasn't passed yet, right? That's still...
No, I don't think so.
Do you know
All right.
anything about the brass faculty there? I'm still trying to see if I can make the money work to get over there, but I would really like to.
I know. No, should we look? I don't know who's doing it.
I can send it to you. They've changed it up for the first time in a long time,
Okay.
which is great.
Yeah, I saw a list of names and some websites, but I just have never heard of them. So
Yeah, the previous years, it's always been like one person for each instrument for the whole
Mhm.
time, or some of them are there part of the time. And now I think Christine and Marcus will be there the whole time, and then there's
cool.
like 8 people or something who will rotate. It's a really big shift. I'll send it to you, and I can send you some info.
Yeah, and Marielle Roberts is going to be there for the cello for part of the time, so that's pretty awesome.
She's awesome.
Yeah, so awesome. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about it. Because it's not too far from
Yeah.
me. Because I'm in the UK. So
Oh, good. So if you're going back to the summer for the summer anyway, well, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. But I am in a duo with a percussionist and we improvise together. And I was wondering, would there be a place to bring him along too? Or do you know if that would ever work?
Well, this is my first time teaching at Darmstadt, so I definitely am not the most knowing of how things go, but there is percussion. So if that person wanted to go, I'm sure there would be a way for you all to work together. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that would totally be great within the bassoon workshop. That would be a very cool approach to it, would be for you to write something for him, or the two of you to write something together to play. I mean, initially I had thought like I didn't even need it to be bassoons. Like it could be, and that's cool, but it doesn't have to be. But there is something nice about, like, especially for an instrument that doesn't have much history of like a lot of more out playing and repertoire. Maybe it's nice for there to be a little huddle, a bassoon huddle, so people feel kind of part of a group of like-minded
Yeah.
readists.
Little cult of bassoons.
Yeah. Have you ever done the Meg Quigley stuff, Lauren? Do you know about it?
I know that they all were playing Vivaldi.
Oh, yeah. Is that
Um,
all?
That's all I saw. It's a competition, right?
Yeah. I think there may be, I would keep an eye on it I think that the person who runs it's really great. I haven't seen her in a long time, but she taught me one semester in college, Nicolasa Custer. And I think, and Ben went to it for maybe he went to teach or something, or just guest, or just to listen. And he said it was a really warm, nice community. So it may be that they're playing Vivaldi, but I do think that it's a pretty nice vibe. So I don't know, maybe it will open up to you in terms of the repertoire over time.
Yeah, I'm looking at the or is it in Michigan one, the new bassoon school?
Okay, I don't know about that.
Yeah, they have a dark songs one, something like that.
Cool.
They're very new music based, but I find American courses are far more expensive than European courses.
Yeah, if you can get to Europe, Darmstadt's not that expensive for for how much is going on. But it's expensive. The flights are hard. So
I probably get a train, so it's not too bad.
yeah. Yeah. So what are you doing with the bassoon? Like, you're playing with this duo?
Yeah, that's when I'm back in the UK.
Okay.
Here I'm working towards my final recital.
What are you gonna play?
The Gabardina Concerto, Boat Song, Lisa Lim's Boat Song, and Torsion.
And which?
Torsion by Olga Neuwirth.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, and then a couple of devised, sort of improvised pieces, which haven't been written yet. So
yeah, that's okay.
other people are writing them for me, and then I think one of them is 3 pre-recorded me's, and I'll improvise with those tracks. And
nice.
Yeah, so we'll see.
Very cool. And what about you, Mason?
Kind of the same. Our recitals are like the same weekend.
When is that?
May 6th and 7th.
Awesome.
I kind of have like the backwards experience of what you described your like undergrad and grad school was like. I did composition as my undergrad, and then figured out that I really wanted to be playing tuba more. So at Cal Arts have been kind of doing some performance catch up. So I'm doing the Vaughan Williams tuba concerto with a chamber group. But I'm gonna improvise all the cadenzas and still make it like
cool.
Cal Arts cool. But sort of proving to myself that I'm a real tuba player.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the composition faculty here who I take lessons with, Wolfgang von Schweinitz, wrote me a solo piece.
Nice.
I got really into the just intonation world.
Beautiful.
Cal Arts a lot.
Yeah. And then some improvised music as well. I have a few like jazz groups that I'll do some stuff with.
Awesome. I love it. I love, these are great programs you are describing.
There are a lot.
Yeah,
And
it's a lot.
And y'all should also send Katie the live stream. When they
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Yeah, we'll do.
See how practice goes.
If you don't send it, I'll send it. That's great that they're both of your recitals are so yours. It's really nice.
Mm. Yeah, and school was great for that too. Like I came here knowing I wanted to do the Gabardellina as like my biggest piece. And I thought it would be my hardest piece, but I was wrong. But they've been very good at like trying to make that work for me too. So
Who do you take bassoon lessons with?
John Staney.
Cool.
Yeah, I was taught by Graham Salvage, who was principal of the Halle in Manchester.
Mhm.
He knew no new music techniques. And I encountered the John Steinmetz bassoon sonata.
Mhm.
It had like note bends in it, and his mind was blown, and I didn't know how to do it. So I was just sort of making my way through it, pretending I knew. And then I applied to UCLA, and John Steinmetz went here and said, I think you'd also like Cal Arts. So I applied to both and then came here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think, wait, what was the Steinmetz called?
I think it's just sonata,
Okay.
bassoon sonata, or it's bassoon and piano, but I often play it with vibraphone.
Oh, nice. I feel like I'm wondering if I played that on my recital in college. I played.
Yeah, the concerto too, I think, which is very similar.
Anyway, I'm gonna look back and listen to it and see if it's what I think it is.
The last movement's a lament, and it's kind of improvised.
That's totally it. Yeah.
It's
I played that on my senior my last recital at Oberlin too. That's so cool.
yeah,
It's a really pretty piece that's like got a little bit of something in there, but it's also not too crazy.
yeah. I remember the second movement always being super hard. It's like a 4-part round, but the piano is having to play 3 of the parts.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I think I didn't even I was like, that's your problem.
Yeah. I mainly just bring the third movement. If I'm ever doing like a performance, I'll always bring out, I did the third movement in my recital last semester. So
Yeah, it stands alone pretty well, I think, if I recall. Yeah,
yeah.
very cool.
Sorry, Volker's just walked
Yeah, the
past our
dean
room.
just walked by.
What's he doing at school?
You're
Yeah.
doing something legitimate.
Yeah, it's true.
Walker, Roxanne, and a whole bunch of construction people with chairs. So
What are you, so you're both gonna graduate?
yeah.
Yeah, so what's your, what lies beyond, and how's that feeling?
Feels bad.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, but I wasn't sure how to ask this, so sorry if it comes across pretty wrong. When you moved and were doing all the band things, how did you sort of support yourself at the same time, and how do you manage that time?
Yeah, I always had jobs outside of music.
Okay, cool. That's good to know.
Yeah, no, I, funny enough, managed to support myself with my comparative literature degree. I always got like copywriting adjacent jobs, basically. In Chicago, I worked for the free weekly newspaper as a proofreader. It was a great job. I actually got health insurance, and I worked like 30 hours a week, and it was interesting. And then in New York, I had a job for a database where I wrote blurbs about books that I usually hadn't read for a database. It was was fine and easy and terrible and easy and not that bad. But by the end, at first it was like 9 to 5 in the office, but then the company got bought out at least once or twice, and I somehow managed to keep my job, and not through any of my own merit, but just through the randomness of corporate restructurings. And then by the end, I was mostly working from home. I didn't have an on-site supervisor. So I was just like, I would like work for, I had also like kept my tip is just keep the expectations low, like meet of your day job, like meet the expectations, and then go like 7% above to show that you're like a little bit ahead of the but that's it. Do not overachieve in your day job. And so I, by the end, could get my work, my weekly quota of blurbs written in about like a day and a half. And then I had like 3.5 days to like write pieces
Okay.
and then check my email, you know. It didn't feel great, but it kind of worked, you know.
Yeah.
But it was a full-time job. It was a full-time job. And that was how I got health insurance and stuff like that.
When did you like make the switch to full-time musician? Did that happen before you got the job at Emory, or?
You know, I made a decision when I was after my undergrad that I would rather have a job outside of music than like try to gig and piece it together, just for me and where I was at with stuff. That's what I decided, and it worked out better for me. And then that was the job experience I had. And so then when I came back after my master's, that's what I did again in New York. And so even when I went to grad school at Northwestern, it wasn't, we got a tuition. We didn't have to pay tuition. We got tuition fellowship, but the stipend we only got paid if we taught music theory or ear training or something like this. And it was so not enough to live on. So that's when I got the job working for Pitchfork Festival. And so I did that all through my graduate studies in order to pay my rent. And I basically did social media for them and copywriting again, press releases and stuff like that. I hated it. I mean, I like had to make Facebook posts about but I liked the people I worked with, and I liked the bigger, or not so much Pitchfork, but the organization that was the logistics side that I worked for also was like a bunch of free jazz musicians. So I liked those people that I worked with, and I liked, ultimately the festival wasn't a bad thing to be putting, you know, I enjoyed the festival too. But the actual job I had to do, I did not enjoy, but it was very flexible, and that was good. But I definitely remember there being days when I was like, tickets were having to go on sale that day, and I had a piece due, and I was like, you know, stressfully trying to make a tweet and not like screw up the tweet and then get back to formatting parts or something. And it was pretty rough. But at what I guess the shift that happened was then at some point I got this adjuncting gig. But I still did Pitchfork for a long time. And I started adjuncting at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago, and I taught. So that was super lucky. Or good timing. You know, they asked me in August. I was actually at Darmstadt the last time I was there. It was in 2017, and they asked me to, 2016, summer of 2016 in August. They were like, I got an email from the SAIC being like, would you like to teach this improvisation class starting in August, like this month? And I was pregnant also. So I was like, yeah, I do. Because this is like, I was like, this is the best adjuncting gig I'm going to get in Chicago teaching at SAIC. But unfortunately, I was also teaching an improvisation course at Northwestern that I had designed that fall. So I could kind of do the same thing in both classes. But I wasn't finished with my dissertation yet. So I also had to finish my dissertation. And I was like, I'm due in November. So it was a pretty crazy fall, but that was good that I did that, because then I took a semester where I didn't teach after my kid was born. And then I came back and they offered me more classes at SAIC, and that I got a lot of really good teaching experience. And so I think I was mostly just adjuncting at SAIC for a year or so, I forget now. But I got to design several courses, and that was really great really great teaching experience. And so then by the time I went on the job market, I had like taught ear training and theory at Northwestern as a grad student. And then I had also designed like a class on noise and a class on and the improvisation workshop at SAIC. So I had this pretty nicely balanced like teaching experience. But I always had other side hustles all basically until I landed a full-time job. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
That's,
Yeah.
nice to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, like an academic job is also a day job in a sense, right? Like I feel extremely fortunate. I really feel fortunate in my job, but, and I know there's a lot of people who don't get to have the full-time academic job. So I'm not trying to poo-poo it, but it's a lot of like administrative tedious stuff and like committees, and there's a lot that like is not creatively fulfilling or full-time musician feeling. But on the flip side, you get like supported to do those projects. It's not just something that you're trying to make time for, carve out time for. So yeah, but no shame in the day job.
Yeah, I think I'd rather work coffee shop hours and do music on the side than have to run around the country teaching everywhere. I think a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, the best thing you can do in a day job, I think, is try to get one with flexibility and ideally that pays you enough that you can work as little as possible. So it's like finding something, that's the goal, right? What you really need is time. You need time to practice, to write music, to go to shows. Because you also need to be in a scene, I think, to find people to play with, put on your own music, like make your own stuff happen and go out and support other people's stuff and like show up. And that's how you form relationships, and like that's how you grow as a musician also. And so I think finding a city or a place where you can live and that's affordable enough, or that you can make work financially, but that has an exciting music scene is really crucial to kind of maybe the next, at least that's for me, that was always really crucial in those moments outside of school. But it's hard because cost of living is so high right now.
Yeah. How did you launch yourself into the new scenes? Was it mainly through your graduate studies, or like how did you, I don't know, not announce yourself to that new area, that sort of break in? Was it going through 2 shows and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think so. Like in Chicago, when I first moved there, I didn't really know anybody, but my friend was dating some musician, and so I learned about shows through her. And then we would, find out that someone's playing there, so you go to those shows, and then like a few months later, you're like, can I do a show here? And and then someone's like, oh, will you play on this show with me? Or it just kind of builds. But yeah, I think you definitely have to go out and check stuff out. And then when I moved to New York, I had friends there already, people I knew. And so and also I had been in Connecticut, so I'd been going in a fair bit to New York to participate. And then coming back to Chicago, I kind of already knew the scene. It was different, of course, but some things weren't. a lot of the venues were the same. A lot of the people who had been running things, who put on those series of improvised music, for example, were the same. So I knew knew where to find stuff. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing the job part, specifically of all the stuff you shared. I feel like we've asked, a couple of people have talked about that side of it as well. And I think that it's really important to talk about more and kind of destigmatize having non-music jobs. And like, I think JJ Johnson worked for the public works department as a surveyor, and like all of these
interesting
people that we really celebrate had non-music jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so not just talking about them to destigmatize, but also I think that thing you really said is important, is like identifying what kind of structure really works for you, because it's like the freelancer thing is, as a person in that mode, it's really stressful, and it's like if that, like identifying if that works or doesn't work for you, and like, so thank you for talking about that part especially. That's really,
for sure.
It's just so helpful for everybody here, myself included.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely important to talk about. And I mean, for me, it was like I would rather. I kind of decided I'd rather just make whatever music I wanted to make and not try to make it commercially viable or try to make it a money making venture. And just know that I was going to support myself other ways. And, if I made money with music, great, but I would just put it back into my music. So I had that kind of separate economy for myself where I was like, I pay my bills with the jobs and then I do music, and hopefully my music is going to sustain my music. And then maybe it might eventually sustain me, but that was 20 years before it did. So, yeah. And that's, for me, that was liberating. And it meant that I could make whatever music I wanted. And I didn't have to worry if like it was going to sell a lot of albums, or it was going to like land me a gig with that touring group that was going to pay really well or something like that. So that was freeing creatively.
So I'm gonna open up to, if the two of y'all have any last questions, it'd be wonderful to ask. And we're gonna let Katie go soon. And what I'll do is I'll put some links in the description below the video to lead you to some of Katie's work, because we'll end class a little bit early, so there's time to listen to some of her work as part of class, and that'll be linked below for everyone who's watching this as the premiere version. But before we do that, do the two of y'all have any last questions?
Maybe just your dissertation topic. What were you researching at the time for your graduate studies?
Yeah, for my master's, I kind of wrote about my own music, and some of the things that were influential. Some of the like other art, like a visual artist and author that were influencing me at the time. But for my graduate studies, for my doctorate, I did it really separately. I wrote a piece, and then I wrote a thesis that was on Anthony Braxton's operas. So it was really different. But I had the chance, I played in the opera, and I actually wanted to write about a different aspect of Anthony's music, but he had just premiered an opera and I had gotten to play in the orchestra. And so I had immediate access to that experience and to a lot of the people involved. And so I wrote about that.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then you talked about like having the double degree in your undergraduate. I was wondering, like, you mentioned like being in the same headspace by the end of it for your comparative literature studies and music studies. Like, I was just wondering if you could go into more detail, like what was your focus with comparative literature?
Yeah, sure. My undergrad thesis was on Julio Cortázar, who is an Argentinian short story writer or author, and David Lynch. I did a comparative study of them. And I like wrote about the like music in the fantastical space of these authors and the function that music served narratively, kind of as this space in which like where the fantastic could enter into the story, kind of. So thinking like about that scene from Mulholland Drive or whatever, where she's llorando. And so I wrote about that. But I think it was more just like thinking about creativity. You know, I had at first I'd wanted to be like an environmental studies major, and I just couldn't manage that cognitive dissonance and all the things. I couldn't do it. So comparative literature was like, oh, I'm talking about ideas and art and, you know, trends in art over different periods. And the other reason for comparative lit was because I really wanted to study abroad. And so there was like a legitimating reason. And I went in. So although my language was Spanish, and also at Oberlin, it was kind of a design your own major. And the conservatory was so structured that I really appreciated the openness of the comp lit side. And the only place that my bassoon teacher would let me go study in Spain was in Barcelona, which of course, you know, they don't actually speak Castilian Spanish there. So, but that was where I went. And I did find a program to do some comp lit classes. And there was a woman who played in the orchestra there who I took bassoon lessons with to satisfy my bassoon teacher. So yeah, it was mostly just kind of fun and intellectually stimulating in a way that I needed, that I wasn't getting, honest, frankly, in my music classes a lot of times. So
I think I feel the same sometimes here. I miss the academics side. So I came from an academic university and performance, and I did my master's of musicology there. So I was trying to find that balance. I've always done it very separate, musicology then performance, is trying to work out how to think about the two things.
Yeah. The disciplinary boundaries are tough. And like, you know, even I think people who are musicologists with a performance side, if you get into a musicology job, for example, in academia, you still have to produce a book. Like, it's great if you play concerts, but you still got to produce that book for kind of thing. So those disciplinary expectations are still pretty entrenched.
Well, it's great that Amy has a musicology job now because her books are excellent.
It is.
It works out really good.
Exactly. It's good. It's a good thing for the world that she's making those books. So yeah.
Probably makes her life a lot more stressful.
Well, she got tenure, so it's good. I think that's good.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you so much for joining us, Katie. This has been amazing. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you all for listening to me tell my tale.
Yeah, it's been awesome to hear your tale. We will let you have the rest of your day in Atlanta, and let the two of you for joining us during spring break as well.
Yeah, thank you. I hope to see you both in Darmstadt, or if not, some other time. And it was great to meet you both.
Yeah, thank
likewise.
you very much.
All right, I'm gonna sign off. Great to see you, Maddie. See you
Good to
soon.
see you too, Katie.
Bye.
I'll take care. Bye-bye.